The middle of Australia is home to some of the world's most ancient landscapes. But for the last 2 years, it's also been home to some of the world's most modern machines. This is the Asia Pacific Airline Storage Facility. At the height of the pandemic, 130 aircraft were stored here. Everything from domestic jets to regional workhorses to the giant Airbus A350.
But now air travel is resuming and it's time to put those planes back into service. But how do you do that? And is it even safe to fly them after they've been sitting out there so long?
Empty terminals, empty cabins, and empty skies. At the height of the pandemic, around 17,000 planes were in storage around the world. That's about 2/3 of the global fleet. Australia's busiest airport, Sydney, used to see 1,000 arrivals and departures every day. That dropped to 100 at its lowest.
Without question, this was the deepest, most prolonged crisis the industry has ever seen.
In the months after the September 11 attacks, demand for air travel fell by 20%. During the SARS pandemic, it dropped by 10%. The financial crisis in 2009 saw a sustained, though relatively minor drop. But when COVID hit, worldwide airline travel stopped, almost completely. And even though there has been something of a restart, it's still only 40% of pre-pandemic traffic. It's not expected to return to normal until 2024.
It is no secret. The entire pandemic period has been extremely difficult for us at Cathay Pacific. I would say like it has been for everyone in this industry.
But the recovery is underway. Today, one of those jets that's been stuck in the outback for 18 months is about to get back into the air. It takes nearly a month to wake a plane up from a 2-year slumber, and these are the people that do it.
There's a lot of work to pull an aircraft out of deep storage. There's a lot of removing of protective covers. There's a lot of systems integrity testing and verification to make sure it's safe to fly.
Keeping planes on the ground has been a huge logistical effort. Getting them back in the air, well, that is a whole other challenge.
Everything that was done to put the plane into long-term storage basically has to be reversed. Here's what happens. The tyres are checked and filled with air. All the bearings need to be re-lubricated. Covers on the air data probes need to be removed. The outflow and relief valves must be unsealed and opened. The batteries, just like a car, may have discharged, so need to be checked or changed. The water systems need to be cleaned and refilled. The fuel tanks checked to ensure they haven't deteriorated in any way. Landing gear goes under retraction tests to make sure they still go up and down. The windows are uncovered, and of course the engines need to be fired back up again.
Now, you might recognise these little things. They're the silica bags that come in the packaging for electronics. Well, planes have them too. They're just a whole lot bigger.
Keeping any moisture from settling inside the engines is crucial. But now the covers are coming back off the engines and those silicone bags are coming out. All in all, it can take 250 hours to get a plane ready to fly again. Brakes on a plane can fade within 24 hours, so every aircraft has a dozen chocks to stop it rolling away.
All right, ready? There are chocks like this at airports all over the world, but there have never been so many planes on the ground at the one time. So all of a sudden, there was a global shortage of one of aviation's most basic tools.
Finnair had to get a local carpenter to make another 500 chocks out of wood. They had so many wheels to hold in place. And higher up, there's another unusual concern when a plane stays on the ground for too long.
There are little nooks and crannies that can become a desirable address for all sorts of wildlife.
In the Mojave Desert, Qantas engineers have had to remove rattlesnakes from the landing gear. See the tags hanging out of all the planes? Those are plugs filling the cavities where many of the essential external instruments are.
Yeah, so we're just protecting the sensitive instruments here.
Like the air data probes that measure the external pressure and temperature. Keeping them clear of insects is crucial to the safety of an aircraft. Without all those covers, even larger wildlife can call a grounded plane home.
So after we've done the return to service with this aircraft, we will return it up to the flight line for the flight crew. And the flight crew will actually take the aircraft for a non-revenue flight where they will do a shakedown of the aircraft systems and make sure that from a flight operations standpoint, they're happy that the aircraft is performing in its optimum condition and is safe as well.
This Jetstar Dreamliner is slowly making its way out of the parking lot, ready for its first flight. Under normal circumstances, aircraft wouldn't spend more than a day on the ground. Flight crews constantly monitor system performance from the flight deck, and maintenance personnel perform regular inspections before and after each flight. So this is a nervous moment. Finally back in the air and on its way to Melbourne.
It's not just the planes that need a refresh. Some pilots haven't flown since the pandemic began, so they need to spend time in a simulator to get up to speed, ready to take passengers again.
It's a very regulated environment, so by the time they go back to flying the line again, we know that they're safe and that they're quite capable of operating the aeroplane safely because we've got very important cargo down the back.
As flying resumed in the US, there were close calls that pilots blamed on being rusty. Unstable landing approaches jumped from 14 in every 1,000 to 35. Those numbers are now back to normal.
While that is a concern, I think one positive about Australia being one of the last regions to reinstate its aviation network is that we already know sort of the specifics of those concerns.
There's no one, wind is calm, runway 16 clear to land.
That's the city of Melbourne down there. This is very realistic.
After 20 months out of the cockpit, Dalong Zhang's weeks of practice have him feeling confident and ready to fly.
I think it's surprising what we do remember and what we think we forget. So, but yeah, getting back in, it comes back pretty quickly. So that's very nice.
To be honest, it doesn't take a long time for a pilot to get back up to speed, having gone through training and checking in aircraft simulators, which clearly today are as real as the aircraft themselves.
Can you fly this plane and land it?
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Moving up the ranks as a pilot is a bit like being in the royal family. When a senior pilot departs, the next most senior pilot takes their place and everyone else moves up the ranks too, even if they've never flown that sort of an aircraft before. So, a 777 pilot now needs to learn how to fly an A380. It's called Fleets and Seats. During the course of the pandemic, Qantas laid off somewhere in the vicinity of 240 pilots. So there's a lot more pilots changing fleets and changing seats than there normally would be.
We have clearance, Clarence.
Roger, roger. What's our vector, Victor?
But retraining isn't just happening in the cockpit. Many cabin crew have been out of work since the pandemic first began. Now they're going through an intensive retraining course so they can welcome passengers back.
So please listen closely while we take you through the safety requirements for our Boeing 787. There's a lot that hasn't changed on board. The doors still need arming and then cross-checking. That's why you're doing training. But some things will be different.
Different permits for different ports, especially domestically at the moment. Obviously mask wearing, glove wearing at all times, different procedures with food handling as well.
Along with masks, another change that COVID has brought to flying is a growing preference from passengers to get from A to B with no layover.
It limits the amount of people that you have to interact with. Overall, it gets you to your destination quicker. There's no more extended layovers, delayed flights, meaning you're, stranded somewhere you're not necessarily wanting to be.
This is the aim of Qantas's Project Sunrise. But it means for other airlines like Singapore, Emirates and Cathay Pacific, being aligned to a hub is no longer the advantage it once was. Travellers now have options.
Connecting traffic has been hard hit by COVID, we all know that. But at the same time, there is strong belief and confidence that the hub model will continue to have relevance. There will be preference for those who want point-to-point, and there will be preference for those who will not mind taking a stop, especially when it comes to Australia. Everything is long haul, so you don't mind sometimes taking a stop, have a quick breather.
It's also reshaping the type of aircraft we'll see in our skies.
There's still a lot of aircraft that remain out of service, particularly large long-haul aircraft like the Airbus A350. Some of those aircraft will never come back into service.
That's the case for Air France, Malaysian, Thai, Etihad, Korean and Lufthansa. British Airways and Qantas have flown their 747s for the final time. In their place are smaller, more fuel-efficient planes like the A350 and the Dreamliner. Finding ways to spend less on expensive airline fuel is crucial, and every little bit helps. The weight of a single tea bag burns 1 litre of fuel over the course of a year. When United Airlines reduced the weight of its paper in its in-flight magazine, it saved nearly 770,000 litres of fuel a year, or around $300,000. Many airlines have also returned aircraft they had on lease, and that has left a glut in the market. Before the pandemic, airlines could lease a Boeing 777 for $1.2 million a month. Now you can pick one up for $800,000.
A bargain if you've got that kind of cash.
But for many airlines, cash will be one of the biggest problems going forward. They've been starved of it for nearly 2 years.
Balance sheets for all airlines across the world have been stressed as a result of this. The industry has taken on over $200 billion additional debt. We estimate that it now stands at about $650 to $700 billion in terms of the overall debt to the industry.
That'll affect airlines from around the world in different ways as they struggle to come out of the pandemic.
Our own region remains mixed.
China is one of the few countries left with a COVID-0 policy, and that particularly affects Hong Kong's Cathay Pacific.
So maybe the pace of recovery in Hong Kong might be a little slower, but that's it. The focus is clearly on ensuring that there is enough capacity.
Other regions have different challenges. The Middle East has strong local vaccination rates but relies on stopover traffic between Europe, Asia and North America at its hubs.
Dubai in particular, Qatar as well have really sort of almost switched their focus from being reliant on the hub and spoke sort of model to making their countries and their cities a more desirable place to be.
Africa has relaxed travel restrictions more than most, but it has very low vaccination rates. American Airlines benefited from a fast vaccine rollout and are now back at near pre-pandemic levels. That's helped by a large domestic market, something most European carriers don't have.
The good news in Europe is that they've moved much closer to coordinate their response, and that has benefited the recovery of aviation in Europe.
Australia's aviation industry only survived thanks to around $5 billion in government support, but it certainly was not unscathed. Qantas laid off over 8,000 staff and stood down thousands more. It also lost $16 billion in revenue. Virgin went into administration before being reborn with new owners and a new mid-market ambition. Rex, on the other hand, expanded with new capital city routes. Tiger Air has disappeared altogether, leaving Jetstar alone in the budget travel field for now.
Fascinating thing about this pandemic is that it really has demonstrated how people really do want to fly, and we see evidence of that when border restrictions are removed.
It won't be long until the Dreamliner that left Alice Springs a month ago is back in service. Just a few final tests and tweaks. Like nearly no other industry, airlines rely on our interconnected world.
It is so exciting. It's lovely to see people, reunited with family, being back with my work colleagues. I mean, we all love our job, and that's why we're here, so it's so great to be back.
The sooner we can connect again, the better it is for this industry. Planes don't belong in the desert, they belong in the air, and they're back there once again.